Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another installment of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Super2. Joining me today is
Steve Baxley.
Indeed. Oh my god, he actually introduced himself as Steve Baxley. It's been so long.
I did. It was a fluke, I swear.
Yes, so today we're here to review, what is this, 2011? 2012?
2012. Yeah, 2012 movie.
The 2012 film by Ridley Scott, Prometheus, which in a number of ways is a prequel to the Alien franchise, the first Alien film, more than anything else. And in other ways is kind of just its own thing, and the quality of it varies greatly depending on which one of those things you want it to be.
That is accurate,
Yeah.
yes.
I don't know, Prometheus is such a weird thing to me because I like a lot of the ideas in it, and like just moments where characters stop and have a conversation, I'm like fucking riveted, right? But then just the plotting of it and some of the like suspension of disbelief moments, I guess, and just some of the bigger like scenes just fall so fucking flat for me that it almost becomes laughable. Like, okay, so perfect example of this. I'll do compliment sandwich here, right? The fucking scene where David and the archaeologist guy are talking at the pool table about like why they've come out all this way, and the guy's depressed because he didn't get to meet his creators, and he's like, I wanted to ask them why they made us. And he's like, why did you make me? We made you because we could, David. How disappointed would you be if that was the answer they gave you? Fucking riveted. Absolutely fascinating. So many implications. I'm here for it. Then you get the scene where, like, they pull out one of the engineers and they talk to him. And he just, like, lightly puts his hand on David's head and then just starts killing people for no fucking reason. And it's, like, almost funny how, like, just juxtaposed to the gravitas of that scene is. And then you get like other like great horror scenes like let's play abortion is just absolutely like phenomenal, tense, disgusting, horror driven filmmaking. This movie is such a mixed bag for me.
Dang, all right. If we're jumping just straight into it, I love this movie. I think it's incredible. It's easily my favorite Alien movie. It's so fucking good.
It does not count, and you know it.
No, it does. It does. I mean, Alien Covenant makes it count even more because Covenant and Prometheus are basically like a duology that's supposed to set up the first Alien movie. I will say, by the time you get to the end of Alien Covenant, literally nothing is explained about the first Alien movie. And if anything, there are now just more questions about how you get from point A to point B there. Like, Alien opens with them finding who we now know are the engineers, and there's just a big, like, farm of xenomorphs there. And one of them latches on to the crew, and the first Alien movie gets started from there. But they're on a completely different planet than where they are here. And David sees the last living engineer, or so he thinks here, who gets killed by one of the xenomorphs at the end of this movie. Then in Alien Covenant, he takes the plague of xenomorphs to the engineer homeworld and murders all the rest of them. So, like, if the xenomorphs killed all the engineers, why is there a ship of an engineer with a bunch of xenomorphs out in space somewhere long after this? It doesn't make any fucking sense. But aside from that, aside from the alien shit, this movie is so fucking good. I love this movie. It's Ridley Scott kind of has two gears. He's got like big sweeping epic, and then he's got kind of campy with an emotional family core. And his best movies are the ones where he's able to kind of merge both of them. So like on the one end, you've got like these big sweeping meditative movies like Blade Runner. And then on the other end, you've got these big sweeping campy ass movies like House of Gucci. But then somewhere in the center, you've got things like The Last Duel or Thelma and Louise. And then here Prometheus, where all of the interesting lore stuff is happening. But it's also just this really tightly knit story about either one character or one character's interaction with someone else. And it becomes so much bigger because of that one character's perspective. And when you follow David from Prometheus to Alien Covenant, he's just maybe one of the most compelling characters, if not the most compelling character in the whole Alien Predator franchise, in my opinion. I love David so much. This is one of those movies that's like someone decided to just take a bunch of like English essay buzzwords and string them together into a script. But you know what? Fucking works for me, man. Name it after Prometheus, have a bunch of people have conversations about God, have this weird circular thing about fathers and their creations and shit. No, 100% works for me. I fucking love this movie. That conversation that you're talking about earlier where David's talking to the archaeologist guy and he's like, how disappointed would you be if that's the answer? But then so much of both movies are about how people understand fundamentally that that is the answer, that it is just kind of a happy accident. But that isn't good enough for them. So they either have to convince themselves that that is not the case, or they have to do something to make themselves feel like that's not the case. And David is like the only person who's kind of outside of that loop, or so he thinks, where he feels like he's not caught up in that sort of nihilistic attitude humanity is, where they can't admit where they came from, because he sees it all objectively, and he's going to be bigger and better than that, and he's going to create something that is far more meaningful and far more beautiful than what humanity did, and something that he'll stick around for in a way that the engineers didn't for humanity and the way humanity didn't do for him. But then he ends up in the exact same fucking pattern by the end of it. I love it. I love it so much.
See, it's funny because I haven't seen Covenant, but I remember like when it came out, you did, and you fucking hated the movie.
I did, and that is because the only opinion I have is the one I'm telling you right now, and anything I've said pre.
Okay, like what turned you on it? That's so fascinating to me because like your disdain for Covenant is one of the main reasons I never bothered watching it.
Okay, so a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I went to see Alien Covenant in college when it came out, because this would have been like, I think Covenant was like 2016 or 17, something like that. It was when I was still in college. But I went to go see it with one of my friends, and I don't remember what it was, but I had been caught up on all of the people's online hatred for Prometheus. Joss Whedon did a interview, because he wrote one of the Alien movies. He did an interview at a San Diego Comic-Con back when he used to have like those spotlight panels, and someone asked him like, what did you think of Prometheus? And he says, you mean pro-meaningless? And there was just like this weird sort of continued online hatred for Prometheus for a really long time. And I had a lot of friends in high school and into college that hated Prometheus long before I had ever seen it. So then I went to see Alien Covenant with this friend, and he, knowing how much he hated Prometheus, started projecting a lot of stuff about how much he hated Prometheus onto Alien Covenant. And as I was watching it, I'm like, yeah, these people are fucking idiots. Why are they doing this? I don't understand why you would do this instead of this. Why is everyone on this planet just literally contaminating themselves? Doesn't make any sense. They just keep quoting random people, and none of it seems like it amounts to anything. But then I kind of got off my high horse, and like a couple weeks ago, I don't know why. I was just trying to find some way to kill time. But I saw that Prometheus was on Hulu. And I'm like, I'm just going to rewatch Prometheus just to kind of like do something for a couple hours. And I got so fucking hooked. I rented Alien Covenant immediately after. And I like Alien Covenant less. I think the problem with Alien Covenant is that for the first like 45 minutes, it's just an alien movie, and that's when it sucks. But then the second you get to David and it's not an alien movie anymore, and it's just Ridley Scott musing about philosophy and the nature of existence, it's incredible. And then also the last like fight scene, action scenes are kind of blah. But overall, it's still really like that movie now, and I like it more in comparison to what's going on in Prometheus. I still think Prometheus is better because it tries to distance itself from answering questions about the Alien franchise and instead just kind of introduces brand new questions to the whole thing. And that's probably why I like these two movies more than I like any of the other Alien movies, because Alien and Aliens, and then kind of Alien 3 are all about that original vision Ridley Scott had for the first Alien movie, where like that movie is very much like an insane Freudian horror movie. It's about a penis monster hunting a lone woman across a ship where everything is designed in a really dark and phallic way. There's like a whole body of literature about how like Alien is basically a metaphor for rape and stuff, and that kind of ideology carried over into Aliens, which is a really interesting movie to talk about in terms of like gender roles. And then Alien 3 kind of tries to do that, but it sucks. And then Alien Resurrection tries to do that, and it sucks. And then Prometheus just takes all that out the window and says, no, fuck all of that. We're not talking about sexuality anymore. Now we're talking about the meaning of life itself.
We're talking about,
and I find that way more interesting.
We're not talking about sexuality anymore. Now we're talking about parentage. Oh.
Exactly. We're talking about the more existential thing that comes after the dick.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's fair. It's interesting. My thing for this is I've never really cared for the alien side of the AVP, like, verse, right? Like, I like the first Alien in concept and as a movie. I think it is a very well-made film, but it just bores the shit out of me. It just, like, every time I sit down and try to watch it, I'm like, okay, this is a good scene. Like, all of this is objectively good. I am still bored. I think it's a 79 film. It still has a lot of 70s pacing. Let's just be honest, right? Aliens is the only one of the franchise I actively like and actively think is a good film. Alien 3 sucks. Alien 4 is literally just the worst film ever made.
It's pretty bad, yes.
So, like, I don't care for a lot of the Alien franchise. And the funny thing is, I love the Predator stuff, and what's hilarious is the Predator's always consistently, like, the same fucking movie. It's just situation, but the Predator shows up, as we've discussed. But unfortunately, once the aliens come in, they infect the Predator movie with their bad, and the Predators can only do so much to salvage the movies that they're in, right? So then you get to Prometheus, and my thing with Prometheus is I actually quite like it when it's not trying to, like, be an alien movie.
No, 100%. I agree.
Yeah, like, the second you get, like... And I think it's, like, distracting, right? Because ultimately, from, like, a lore perspective, I think what this movie sets up, and this may have been confirmed, and it's just kind of, like, going off of what the characters are talking about, because they're all doing... They're archaeologists, right? So they're making shit up and hoping that they're right. And that's basically what they're doing here is... I think a lot of people think that Prometheus, for the Alien franchise, is trying to offer an explanation of how the aliens in the first movie got to that planet. And that is not at all what Prometheus is trying to do. Prometheus is basically just showing you this is how the xenomorph was created. This is the process that was gone through for it. But the xenomorph chestburster giant facehugger thing that you see that takes out the engineer at the end of this film, that is not a finalized xenomorph. These are basically like your beta tests, your early drafts of the genetic monstrosity. And that's, like, interesting and kind of cool and stuff to an extent. But the problem is it does just become distracting, because when you tell someone it's an Alien prequel, which technically it is, they're going to assume that it's going to be more tightly connected to the first film than this has any interest in being. So really what Prometheus is it's a film set in the Alien universe. You know, like Blade Runner.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about it, and that's where Covenant I think is a weaker movie than Prometheus, because Prometheus is definitely a movie where it's like entirely doing its own thing. The back end origin of the xenomorph is kind of tangential, where it's important to the narrative of the movie that someone created the xenomorphs, but it's only important because you go in with the assumption from marketing and franchise and stuff like that that it's going to be important. It's not important in the movie in and of itself. In and of itself, this movie is about people trying to figure out where they've come from, and in like a classical Frankensteinian kind of way, they realize that messing with things that are above you is going to lead to disaster. And so the engineers created humanity, and humanity is sorely fucked. So the engineers wanted to kill humanity because they didn't want it to get any further. And in their hubris, they just ended up killing themselves. And humanity's desire to go and find their gods and learn from them and never grow old again led to them killing themselves too. And David's desire to be above humanity's petty squabbling leads to him basically wiping out both civilizations. So like that kind of stuff is really, really interesting. That's what the movie is really going for. But the fact that it uses a xenomorph and then posits an origin for them kind of overshadows in the dialogue everything else that's going on in the movie. So it just kind of becomes an Alien prequel tangentially, even though this particular movie was intended to be a lot looser in connection than what Covenant ended up being. And then you get to Covenant, and all of the worst parts of Covenant are the ones where it's just like an Alien movie. And in this one, I like a lot of where this ends up. But there is a part of me where, like, there are certain elements of the final action scene, particularly when the engineer just starts murdering people. And then when the engineer and the xenomorph are locked into the ship and the xenomorph, like, eats from him and becomes, like, a fully grown neomorph or whatever they call it in Covenant. That kind of stuff loses me because I just don't care. I don't care about where the xenomorphs came from. I care about, like, the thematic implications of why someone would make a xenomorph. But the second you start positioning these movies as how does Prometheus and Covenant lead to Alien, the whole thing falls apart because it doesn't.
Yeah, so I don't like the stuff that's connected to Alien just because I feel like it overshadows it. If they were just creating like if it just was a different monster than a xenomorph that they were creating, I think it would be fine as just its own thing. Then there's just the other thing that's like kind of the elephant in the room of this movie was made in 2012 and it's a very like CGI effects heavy film with like their 3D holographic displays and stuff, and I'm just like, that's just so distracting as an audience member. Like there's just no other way to describe it. Like when you have fucking Alien shot in 1979 and they have to go into a special refrigerator room to talk to the ship's main computer, and it's all like fucking DOS text-to-speech kind of shit. Like, yeah, the argument that people have tried to make it in its defense is like, well, those are like the truckers. They get like the shittier, outdated technology, and these are like the cutting edge. These guys get the best technology. I'm like, okay, but like, come the fuck on. This is ridiculous. There's just no fucking way that you can tell me that one of them's from the future, man. Like, I just can't.
It's weird because like this is set like several decades before the first Alien movie too.
It's like, I think it's over 100 years before the first Alien movie.
Yeah, something like that.
It's just too much. It's too much. Like, I get it. Ridley Scott wanted to do something cool and play with new effects and stuff, and that's great. But if you're gonna make it in the same universe, you should maybe scale that shit back just a tad. So there's that. But like, again, that's just, it's only a problem because of the relation to it being connected to Alien. Because it's like, no, that's just fucking distracting. Stop it. My other
That's
thing,
the
my other
thing,
thing I
right?
want to talk about before we get too far off track of this is, so every time that it's like connections to Alien proper come up is where it's at its weakest, except for the fucking engineer just randomly going on a killing. I'm sorry, Steve. You can talk up the movie as much as you want, talk about it being like good, and I'd agree with you for scenes, but the second they pull out the engineer and he's not like elegant or interesting at all. He like literally, I think Jason Voorhees is a more compelling villain by the time that fucker starts up on whatever the hell he's doing.
Well, and that's part of what I like about the engineer in general. Is like there is this perception from the very beginning that humanity was created by gods, and going into space to find your maker is finding something majestic or noble. Doctor, what's her name? Dr. Shaw. Dr. Shaw is religious, and she's the only religious person in the movie, and that's kind of important too, because even when you get to the very beginning of the movie, and the first engineer that we see kills himself and falls into the water in order to create humanity, there is kind of like a really obvious on the nose religious allegory happening there, and the fact that as the movie goes on, Shaw never really loses her idea of a god existing. And finding the engineers doesn't shake that belief. It just tells her that there's something beyond them. But the idea that everyone's going into this looking for the engineers to be our idea of God, and then instead they just turn out to be petty humans prone to violence, big, bulking, and stupid, and they're not any better than us, is kind of perfect, because that's exactly what you'd expect from the kind of people who would talk to a creature they created in David and say, we made you because we could, with just like such callousness. Like that kind of parallel works really well for me. Like the drunk archaeologist and the engineer, they're the same. That's the point of the movie, I feel like.
I don't know.
But that being said, there was a bunch of deleted dialogue from the engineer before he just rips David's head off that didn't make it into the final cut of the movie. And in that conversation, he... Well, no, what I'm saying is in that conversation, go into more of that detail that I think people maybe would have wanted, but I think that sort of takes the wind out of the sails of the movie, because the second you let the engineer be anything more than a big hulking monster that is just hubris, then I think you've lost the point of the movie. Because if the engineer turned out to be anything bigger, then someone was right, and they can't be. At the end of the day, the whole point of the movie is that David's the only one that sees through everyone's bullshit, because humanity is too full of hubris to see what they've done, and the engineers are too full of hubris to see what they've done. That's why they both die, because they're both dumb. They don't get it. They don't get that you can't play with life and death in this way, and you can't be callous about what you created. And if the engineer was anything more than that, then I think it just doesn't work.
I mean, maybe, but it's like there's certain moves as a writer that it might work in theory on paper, like when you try to argue it out, there might be a good argument for it, but there's just something to be said for the gut reaction it creates in the audience when you do a rug pull like that. And fundamentally, I don't think it works. I don't think it is... It instead of making it seem like it's such a letdown that they're so less than, it just comes off as laughable. The initial reaction is more laughable than it is of the deeper nature of what you're talking about. What is the dialogue?
I think that though
has
less to...
What is the dialogue that the engineer shares with David in and of itself? Just out of curiosity.
Let me see if I can find it. Honestly, it's a deleted scene. Let's see. Full conversation between engineer and David.
Everybody's favorite part of Geeky Gentleman. See, if I was a proper editor, go through and cut this part out, and we just get to the rest of the meat of the conversation. But I'm not gonna fucking do that because I provide you, the listener, with the raw, unfiltered conversations. See, this is a business strategy. You turn every weakness into a strength.
Okay, so all right, so this is essentially what they say. Wayland asks him to make him not die, and he says you wouldn't be human if you didn't grow old and die. And they ask him who he is and what he did, and he says that the engineers have spawned many civilizations across the universe. That this is just kind of their thing, that they just create life across the universe. And I'm trying to find the spot where he decides to go just kill him. Let's see. So Shaw has a bit of dialogue here where she like demands to know like why we were created, and that's the thing that angers the engineer because he thinks it's too presumptuous for his creations to ask him why he did this, and that he doesn't share human emotions, and that he doesn't think about their life because they've just spent all of humanity being violent and destroying their own planet. So it's really preachy. It's really preachy, and it's really kind of lore-y. I'm really glad they cut all of that.
Yeah, no, and I think I agree with you that they cut it, and it probably works better for what they're going for. But I still think that something should have been there to just something simple to more drive the point home about why he was going to do what he did. Because just again, the way he just gently places his hand on David's head and then just rips it the fuck off. It's only funny to me. None of the deeper emotion what you're talking about rings at all.
Well, and not to split hairs, but I don't think that's a question of how the movie was written. I think it was the right call to write it this way, and I think it was the right call to cut that dialogue. I think the problem that you're pointing out is more just how they decided to shoot or construct what was left of that scene probably didn't work the best. I'm sure there is a way you could have better created an atmosphere where the engineer waking up feels really, really important, and putting his hand on David's shoulder feels really important, and then ripping David's head off feels terrifying. But it doesn't look that way, but I don't think that's a matter of how the movie was written. I think that's just a matter of like, most of this movie does not look very good in general. That's my other big problem with it, is like there are certain scenes where like the shots are really, really cool looking, but most of it is just kind of dull looking and uncreative. And you can tell Ridley Scott cared a lot more about like how much he could put on the screen as opposed to trying to figure out if the frame was full of meaning or not, which is a thing for him. Like a lot of his movies have a problem.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily it. I'm just saying that I can see where you're coming from with the argument for the rug pull makes sense. The rug pull adds to the story, but I'm just gonna stick to my guns on this one of maybe it does, but the way it was shot and the way it was presented without any dialogue to explain what the fuck he is doing or is going through his head of at any level of why he wants to do this, it just makes the scene laughable, and it makes just every second that dude's on screen after the fact just laughable to me. It's not even remotely interesting. And it's a problem because it's right
I don't get the. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a problem because it's right at like the climax of the movie. So a lot of the stuff that happens after the fact, post David getting his head ripped off, just feels like less. I feel like it lost a lot of emotional investment at that rate.
I mean, I wouldn't call it laughable because I didn't have that reaction. I really liked that choice, but I would say that I think the bigger problem is just when it sort of devolves into being chased around by a monster, it's a lot less interesting than everything else. I like that David presumes that Shaw's going to help him just out of pure commitment to the mission. I like what Shaw's fate ends up being when you get to Alien Covenant. I like that the xenomorph baby thing is what ends up killing the engineer too. Like I think all of that stuff thematically works really well. I just sort of feel like the action movie, we need to ram the spaceship into the other spaceship because humanity's doomed thing can all just kind of been cut. I mean, there's a lot of that's kind of
that, and like this is, I think, the meme take, like the CinemaSins take from Prometheus that's stuck around, but it's like it is just so fucking accurate to like suspension of disbelief breaking of when the ship is crashing and they're running away from it in line with how it's crashing is so fucking dumb. I'm sorry, but that, like, not to agree with the meme take that just creates the easy, like, this is why this movie is bad. No, like, a million fucking movies do this, of like, no, just run to the side, but at the same time, no, seriously, just like run like to the left or just pick a direction and go. Don't go with it. What are you doing? And then it's like double down because like part of it's like, well, no, they couldn't do that because then it could tip or the debris or something. And then like that's all cut away by the fact that she does actually trip and then rolls to the side. And that's how she survives. Just fucking kills me.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff towards the end there just kind of feels like tacked on because so much of this movie has been people sitting around talking, and they kind of needed something more bombastic towards the end there. But it's rough because I feel like every time there's like 30 seconds I don't like, there's like another 2 minutes immediately after that I love. Or at the very least, I get what they're going for, and I think what they're going for is worthwhile enough to where it doesn't matter. The thing with a lot of movies is it's one thing to like talk about your emotional reaction at having watched it, but I think the thing that can often be more interesting is the emotional reaction you're having is usually intended. It's usually something that's happening on purpose. So like, what's that fucking movie called? There's that Colin Farrell horror movie that a lot of people don't like and a lot of people like, and it's got the guy who plays the Joker in it. From the new Batman movie. But essentially, Killing of a Sacred Deer. There we go. Killing of a Sacred Deer. But Killing of a Sacred Deer is a really good example of like, you watch that movie and the camera's always pulled really far back from the main people and no one talks like a real person and everything's kind of muted and everything's kind of dull. And a general reaction to that will be, why is everything so distant? Why does no one talk like real people? Why is everything so dull? I'm bored. But the more interesting thing, I think, is if the movie is intentionally putting you at a distance and intentionally showing you things in a way that is supposed to be perceived as dull, is supposed to be perceived as kind of away from the emotions of all the characters, then there's probably a reason for it. And that reason is what the movie is going for. The reason Killing of a Sacred Deer has that emotional disconnect is because it's a movie about a family that is emotionally disconnected. And what goes on with the Joker character in that movie is the thing that brings their emotions out and draws them together, and that's why the movie's shot that way. Prometheus is the same for me. We're like, there's a lot of things about this movie that are kind of goofy or on the nose, but a lot of that is in service to something else. And I think if you can move past what your reaction was and just think about it in terms of if this reaction was intended, never mind if it was or it wasn't for real. But if we pretend like this reaction was intentional, can you get something else out of it? And I think in this movie you definitely can.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. That's something I always have a hard time with, of separating what the movie wants me to have versus what the immediate, like, feeling the movie gave me. Right? And I don't know. That's asking for quite a bit of generosity, in my opinion, of the
but to be fair,
between you as a consumer, as an audience member of the piece and the artist, is you're donating your time to see their piece and see what they have to say, and how you react to it, what it stirs up in the moment is partially on you and what you're bringing to the thing, but is ideally they want to stir up XYZ emotion. They are going for a particular reaction. And when you don't react in the way that the film wanted you to react, it doesn't really matter what the intention was. It's just not what happened.
Well, but see, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you are reacting the way the movie is intending you to react. But that reaction is something negative, and that's the point. Like, if the movie is trying to bore you, and you're bored, then the question is, why does the movie want me? Or like, if the movie is taking the rug out from under me on this pivotal scene, why is it doing that on purpose? Just giving it that level of forgiveness to say, I had a bad reaction to this, but what if I was supposed to? And if I was supposed to, is there maybe something behind that reaction that's worth looking at?
Steve, I think this perfectly explains why you get into toxic relationships.
But I mean, I think like the way you describe what you're talking about, I get what you're saying, but it's kind of transactional, and I think that's a different way of looking at something as like an audience member going in and watching a movie versus like wanting to critically evaluate the movie on a different level, right? Like if we're going to be critical of the movie, then being critical of the movie also means being charitable to what it wants from you and seeing how far you can take it. You don't have to necessarily enjoy it, but like if it's doing something and it's creating a reaction in you, whether that reaction's positive or negative, the question isn't what I had this reaction. The question is, what does this reaction tell me about the movie?
Okay. Do you remember the film Red Line?
I don't think so.
You shouldn't, because it's a piece of shit. It's from like 2007. It's one of those car movies that they made because Fast and Furious was doing kind of well initially, but kind of fell off.
Oh, okay.
So they're like just try and throw stuff at the wall. It's a piece of shit movie. Absolutely terrible. But one of the scenes in it, there's two. One of the scenes in it that kind of like, I know what you're going for, but you've done it so poorly that it does not matter. And here's my actual reaction. So the first scene is pretty like kind of cookie cutter, silly, stupid shit, where this guy's brother goes into the car to do a race to try to like save the car, save money, whatever it was. I don't fucking remember. But like, you know, he goes in the car, he gets in the race, and then tragedy strikes, and at the finish line the car flips over and explodes because it's got like nitrous in the tank or something, and
of course it has nitrous,
and the brother is just at the other end of the finish line, and he like falls to his knees, and it's like slow motion. He's like, no, like you see the car, and it's just everything's so poorly done to that point that the movie has not at all earned like any kind of emotional investment in these so-called characters, and so and the acting's terrible, and the CGI effect explosion is terrible, and so you just sit there and you just fucking laugh. You're meant to be what they wanted from you was to feel sympathy, to feel bad for this character, to scream no along with the tragedy that you've just witnessed of this character whose name I can't remember dying on screen. But instead, what you get is just a belly laugh because of how poorly everything's done. And then the other scene in this movie that, like, to this fucking day just boggles my mind, and I've never seen writing this shit before or since. And it's the villain of the movie is a counterfeiter, but he's in deep because he's got a contract with someone else, and so he's trying everything he can to get money or get good counterfeits to pay this guy off with, because he's apparently agreed to give this guy $40 million in counterfeit bills. And the guy on the other end of the phone says, "You'll either give me $40 million in counterfeit bills or $40 million in real money." And then he clicks the phone off.
What?
I'm like, what exactly? Because like that's not how counterfeiting works. No one would pay $40 million for $40 million of fake money. What?
What? It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yes, but like you see what I mean, right? Of like
If the 40 million was okay to begin with, then just take the
right?
counterfeiting. It doesn't make any sense at all.
So it's like, but it's a very poorly done scene, and what the reaction that is wanted is for you to be like, oh, the tenseness. Oh, this is a really bad guy. He's really dangerous. That's how scary this guy is, and that's how like the villain that we thought was the villain the whole time. This guy's the even bigger villain. Oh no! But instead, you just sit there like trying to fucking wrap your head around the cost of counterfeit money, and so. Certainly, I don't think anything in Prometheus is that level of
I would hope
fucking
not.
bad. But you begin to see what I'm talking about when it's just like you can only be so charitable in critiquing something. You can see where it's coming from, but the reaction you have in the moment has to count for something. And it's
No, but that's not what I'm saying, right? I get what you're saying, but that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like you're saying that like your reaction is irrespective of the intent, and I get that. I agree with that. What I'm saying is take, for instance, the reaction that you do have and pretend like it's the... So like if your reaction is this is fucking stupid, then let's pretend like that's the goal the whole time and see if it gives you something else out of the movie. That's what I mean. I'm not saying you're at odds with what they want. I'm saying what you got is assume that's all what they wanted from the beginning and go with it, and then see if there's something to be gotten from that point afterwards. Because I think that's way more interesting to recontextualize a movie. Like if the idea in Prometheus, to get back here, like in Prometheus, if like the big thing in this movie that like really won it over for me really early on is that David's like descent into clearly being unhinged is telegraphed super early on, where this is one of those things where like David's already like ignoring people and not listening to commands pretty quickly the second he realizes the engineers are out there, and someone probably should have been like paying more attention to the things they said to this dude before he decided to just unleash this humanity's god on the rest of the world. The way he just like drugs the archaeologist guy to give birth to the xenomorph and everything. But part of why I think that works is everyone else is in this movie is so unbearably consumed by what they want that they have a really hard time of seeing the forest for the trees. The fact that the archaeologist dude, he gets to the planet and sees the ruins and just immediately assumes that the entire hope of finding this purpose and civilization is just immediately lost. The idea that the Wayland character wakes up and just assumes for no good reason whatsoever that he could get eternal life from the engineers. There's no reason for him to believe that. That's a really stupid thing to do, but he does it anyway because he's just that in his own head about what he wants. He creates David as a thing that can live forever, and then immediately ignores that to go into this passion to live forever because he's so afraid of dying. And that kind of like character flaw becomes really interesting, not only in this movie, but as it carries over into Prometheus when you get more of David's backstory. All of that stuff I find really interesting. And what I really like about this movie, independent of the Alien movies, is that it's really not trying, as much as it can help it, it's really not trying to lean into any of the stuff the other Alien movies did. And the thing that you and I both agree on here is that I think all the Alien stuff does overshadow it, but I think it overshadows it not because of its own fault. I don't think Prometheus as a movie is trying to appeal to the Alien side of it and getting lost in the details. I think Alien Covenant kind of gets lost in the details of the Alien world. But all of the alien baggage that this movie has, I think, is projected onto it. Because if you just watch this movie as its own movie, irrespective of any of the Alien movies, none of that matters. And all of the stuff that kind of glosses over and becomes more of a traditional Alien movie, it doesn't work that way anymore because now you're not thinking about it from the perspective of how do you get from here to 1979 Alien.
I guess. I don't know. I feel like we're going around in circles on this argument, so I'm not going to really sit here and try to fight with you on it for days and days and days. It's just, I don't know. I'll give it to you if you really, really want it that bad, but this is such just a mixed bag of a movie for me, because everything that I like about it is all the stuff that like feels kind of undercut by the bad about it. I don't know. I have a hard time with this film. I like a lot of the ideas, and then there's just like random shit that happens where I'm just like, what does this add to the film? What is the purpose of this scene? Why is Idris Elba trying to sleep with Charlize Theron? What's going on there?
They're both hot.
They're both hot.
That's all you need.
Like,
they're both hot. Hot people just look at each other and they're like, and the rest of us get to be happy about it.
Fair enough. I don't know. That was just like, you could have cut that and maybe like spruced up this part. Why are the two guys like? Why couldn't they get out? They left earlier. Did they get lost? Did the guy who created the map of the place get lost? That seems a little incredulous. Why is this man talking to the thing that is clearly a snake when 5 minutes earlier he was freaked the fuck out by just the idea that there was movement or life signs in the giant complex with them? Why is he just like, nah, I'm gonna talk to that snake? And he's also not the one that's high. So like, what's going on with that scene? Like, you have to give me that whole fucking sequence of the two guys trapped in the tomb, right? Like, that is just out of the most schlocky, stupid fucking horror movie where, like, all the characters lose. Clearly, those guys are being manipulated by the cabin in the woods motherfuckers. Like, that's the only possible explanation, right?
They are really fucking dumb for being stuck in there as long as they did. It's really
fuck this. I'm getting out. I'm lost, but I'm not gonna. I'm lost, but I'm not gonna tell anybody I'm lost. What? I thought you were scared, bro. What's going on?
So something else I wanted to mention about this is there's a tendency in movies with robots who behave like humans or humans that interact with robotic things as if they were human to kind of bury the lead and talk about the movie or talk about that device very literally. So like Blade Runner is a good example of this, where on one like really surface level read, Blade Runner is about the horrors of artificial intelligence, in the same vein as something like 2001 is. But those are two very different things in my mind. Like 2001 is legitimately a computer that can think and feel and has humanity to it and what we do with that. Blade Runner isn't. Blade Runner is a movie about artificial humanoid things that are designed to help explore what it means to be human. It's not really a question about artificial intelligence. It's not really a movie about AI rights or anything like that. It's a movie about being human and what the definition of that is. And Prometheus is similar, where there's a whole like internet conspiracy theory based like web of YouTube videos where people talk about David and like what the human society must be like if you had a bunch of Davids running around and like what are the rights of Davids on Earth or whatever. And I feel like all of that kind of misses the point, because at the end of the day, David's existence in the movie is not about artificial intelligence. It's not like whether he's more or less human than anybody. It's that he's the next in line. Like you could very easily replace David with like a future mutant creature of some kind. You could replace David with an X-Men. Is he the next step in evolution? Because the idea is the engineers created humanity, humanity created David, and David is looking back and saying, this line of progression is nothing but hubris. There is no good reason to do this. So let's stop the chain here. It's not really about him being a robot. It's about him being created by human beings. And I think that's really interesting. And I like the bigger question that the movie implies by the end of like, if the engineers wanted to create the xenomorphs to kill all of humanity, then there is this kind of kinship between David and the xenomorphs, and you get to see why he wants to help cultivate them, because both of them are kind of just used as instruments to enact the will of someone that thinks they're better than them just because they created them. But at the end of the day, that's not their purpose. They can be more than that. And the xenomorphs might be more than just monstrous killing machines, and David might be more than just a servant robot. And the engineers are no more special than humanity, because how dare the engineers judge humanity for being what they are when the engineers decided that genociding an entire planet, clearly they are not any more than anyone else. And someone had to put them on here to make the same mistake too. And those people didn't wipe out the engineers, so like, what gives them the right to do it in the first place? And David resolves that by just killing all the engineers in Alien, because why bother with them? All of that stuff is really, really interesting. I love David. I love everything about the character, and I there are just so many layers you can peel back with him and his relationship to the rest of the movie.
I remember I heard a fan theory about Prometheus at one point in time, and you know what, I fucking, it's so dumb, but I love it so much that I'm just going to always keep it. Which is, the engineers weren't building the xenomorphs to kill off humanity, specifically. They were building the xenomorphs because they were really fucking tired of the predators, and they were trying to find something to just, like, get rid of them. But the predators were like, oh, cool, we can play with these. I remember I heard that years ago, and I'm like, you know, that is a drastic misreading of Prometheus, but I fucking dig it. Let's go for that.
There's a comic strip I saw a while ago where it's like Alien versus Predator, except the Predator is just like a chill suburban dude, and he has a pet dog that's a xenomorph.
That's cool. That's cool. I don't know.
Like, yeah, that's how things should be. That's the Paddington of the Alien v Predator franchise.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird to think of Prometheus and just the engineers as a whole as part of the AVP franchise, because it just gets so washed by both sides of that continuum.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing is, like, every time you kind of go out of your way to connect to the rest of the franchise, none of it like clicks at all. And it just seems like Ridley Scott decided, you know, I own Xenomorphs. These are my creations. I'm just going to slap this on this other movie I'm trying, just so it sells better.
It really does feel that way. It's kind of blatant. And I don't know, it's weird, because I think most of the movie is fine to stand on its own outside of that.
Yeah.
All right, there is another sequence I wanted to talk about, because I didn't have this thought the first time I watched Prometheus, but I did this time. I really like the abortion scene. I think that is one of the most just well done body horror sequences we've seen on film. I think it comes too early, and I think the fact that like the rest of the climax of the film follows it is really weird, because I think it's just like, it's just objectively more interesting than everything else that happens, like, action intense climax wise after it. That it kind of, I don't know, it kind of bugs the crap out of me, and I feel like it should have just gotten moved to later in the film, because again, it's just one of those things that feels like it breaks the logic of the thing. Like, oh, we're gonna put her in quarantine so she can't get rid of this thing that's growing inside of her, but also that we keep everyone else on the ship safe from it. And then she just kind of fucking goes off and does the surgery on her own. And then she's just like walking around and everyone's just like so chill with her, just being there. And I'm like, I don't know. There's...
Well, I mean, at that point, she's kind of a hostage.
What?
At that point, she's basically a hostage, right? Because, like, she gets the xenomorph, and then she finds out Wayland's still alive, and actually none of this had to do with learning about the origins of humanity. This all had to be about Wayland getting eternal life, and she's going to come along with them to accomplish that mission, but they're not here for what she wanted to do. So, like, at that point, she's not really coming along willingly.
She seems like she's going along willingly.
No, she literally gets punched in the gut because she's not...
No, she gets punched in the gut once she's already there. It's already
Yeah, because she's not cooperating. Yes. She's not there willingly.
But she's
literally not. She literally does not want to do this thing that Wayland's making them do. At that point, she is basically a hostage.
I don't know if I fully agree with that, because like when you got the scene with her and Idris Elba, she's kind of making the argument that she has to go. Not in the like
because now
not in the like they're holding the gun to my head. No, like she's still invested and wants to go.
She's still invested in what she wants, but this stopped being about that at that point. Like that the whole thing there is she wants that archaeological perspective, but also because she never lost faith in trying to find humanity's creators, and she doesn't presume that the engineers are God, but maybe they're a stepping stone to it. And this whole mission has not been about that, which was kind of obvious from the get-go, but by this point has not become that at all. The second most of the crew basically dies because of the xenomorph, this mission has completely gone awry, and now all Wayland wants is that he wants eternal life, and she's not down for that, but she has to come along anyway. And the only reason she's sticking with them is because if the engineers do ultimately still stick around, and they did invent this thing to kill all of humanity, then someone's got to stop it. But she's not on their side at that point. She's just there because she has to.
I don't know. And I still...
It's literally the plot of the movie.
It's just not the vibe I got from it. And again, just the fact that it's like all after the abortion, it seems like they should be a little bit more pissed at her. Because, you know, Wayland Yutani's always got an investment in birthing xenomorphs from women. That's kind of like the company's like slogan. So just
I will agree. You could probably shave like a 30 minutes off time of this if like the climax was just the abortion machine, and then David getting decapitated and the last engineer being murdered by the xenomorph, and then ignoring all of that stuff about ramming the ship into the ship and the last engineer trying to like kill everyone off the crew and all of that stuff. Like, if you really did just let it be, she gets the abortion, the parasite thing jumps out of her and kills the engineer, and then they take the ship and fly away with David, I think that probably would have been a little stronger.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels a little muddy. Also, speaking as someone that's had abdominal surgery, I don't give a fuck what kind of pain meds you're on or what kind of shock you're going through. You ain't walking. Like, I'll give her that she, on adrenaline, could get out of the fucking pod. That's the end of that. No, like, trust me, dude. When I fucking had my surgery, after I was still, like, recovering from the anesthetic, they asked me if I wanted to get myself from the surgical bed back into my hospital bed. And I couldn't fucking, like, I couldn't lift my upper body up. I don't give a fuck what futuristic pain meds or surgical incision machines or no, the fucking muscle fibers that hold you together. It's not fucking happening. So the fact that she does that and then she's like jumping over fucking gaps like it's a goddamn video game, and she gets like butted in the stomach by a gun and doesn't just immediately pass the fuck out. It's just, again, the suspension of disbeliefs for me in particular began to just get so wide that it made the like really good scene feel like it just came earlier than it needed to. I don't know. Again, mixed bag of a movie. A lot of the things I like seem to get kind of washed out by other things that progress. Okay, here's another one. And this is not at all an alien thing. This is just like a, wait, but what? Because we're in agreement, and Idris Elba like floats the theory out. This is not the engineer's home planet, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you see that in Covenant.
Okay, figured. All right. So why is it that the thing that has set them up on this quest is the engineers pointing to a star system that this planet is a part of that they're showing to ancient humans, and the ancient humans are recording it? What? If the engineers at that point had not decided to end humanity, why are they showing them the star system where they're working on ending humanity? What's going on with that?
Well, we don't really know what they were doing there, right? Like that's part of the thing is that they just have a facility here and they happen upon it, but what they were doing here, why they were here, how the xenomorphs got involved at this stage on this planet, like we don't really know any of that.
I mean, I think the scene with David where he like finds the ship and sees that they're planning to go to Earth indicates and is explained to us as the audience, or at least theorized by the archaeologists, that they are planning to take the xenomorphs to Earth to wipe it out. I'm like, okay.
Right, no, they are, but like at what point they decided to do that, what this planet was used for before then, if there's anything else they used to do on here, the number of colonies they have, like they don't explain any of that.
I guess that's fair.
Like this.
It's just one of those
connections. That would be like saying if someone saw a research lab in Asia and they just assumed the entire continent of Asia was for the research lab.
I guess you're right that they do have multiple like ships and stuff on the planet, so you might not be too far. It's one of those things where I didn't think of that the first time watching it, but I did this time, and I'm like, what's going on there? It's like, this is where we're working on destroying you later. Like that's kind of fucked up, right?
And that's more of what I like about it, is like at the end of the day, you don't really know anything about the engineers. Like, you know they created humanity, and you know they decided to kill humanity, but how they decided to do it ended up killing them instead. Yeah, like at that point, I think that's more than enough for them, and I feel like any extra detail probably would have just ruined that a bit. And I know there's like other stuff and other material that apparently like goes more into their backstory, but I like that it's just this. I like that it's just they create humanity, they get killed by the thing they used to kill humanity, and then David murders everyone that's left in the next movie.
Fair enough. I don't know. It's interesting. How do you feel outside of the fact that we both agree that the alien stuff kind of is one of the weaker parts of this film? How do you feel about the new non-Geiger alien designs that they're going with, these prototype xenomorphs and stuff?
I don't like them in this movie. I think they call them the neomorph. I know it's not a xenomorph. Like, it's supposed to be something else because it's like not a fully grown xenomorph.
Yeah, I mean,
or something.
it's a half baked, but whatever you want to call it, just
like whatever like the new one is. I don't love the. It's not really a face hugger. Like whatever the parasitic thing is that came out of Shaw, I thought that design was kind of cool. The thing that spawns out of the engineer in this movie that's like closer to a full-grown xenomorph but isn't quite.
It's like halfway between a chestburster and a xenomorph.
Yeah, it's. I don't know what the word is for it, but it's too shiny. Like the thing about xenomorphs that I really liked in the old school Geiger designs is like it is biological. It looks like it's rusted and keeling over and like bloody, and it looks kind of gross and disgusting, and it looks like a mishmash of things. Like there's no elegance to it. It's just kind of like a hodgepodge of synthetic and organic material. And in this, because they're just kind of being born, I suppose, they have more of like a sheen to them. They look a little bit pure. And in Covenant, you get to see them with like human Caucasian skin over them as opposed to like the black ink. And that's weird. It's in Covenant at the very least, it's like unsettling and creepy. And I like that about it. But the way they don't have the same sort of busyness in the design that the Geiger stuff has, I don't really like.
That's fair. I was just curious. It's just an interesting take on them. I do like the idea of like just the gigantic face hugger, that it's not something that was as quick and as sleek as it became, that it's just this accidental fucking maw Lovecraftian tentacle beast kind of thing, and it takes like a lot of work to get it. That's kind of cool. I know like in canon with xenomorphs, there's like a distinction between a regular facehugger and a facehugger that like injects a queen, And, like, man, they should really fucking up their game on the facehugger that injects a queen and take notes from this one. Because it's just so... it's just so much fucking creepier like this, you know? That, like, I wouldn't want it to replace the facehugger that as exists, but, like, I don't think we've ever seen a queen facehugger on screen, but, like, taking some notes from this I think would be cooler. And then the neomorph itself kind of sucks. I don't like the snake thing. I don't know if that's, like, supposed to be connected to the xenomorphs at all, or if it's just, like, its own independent creepy fucking thing that takes over a body. I'm not sure what's going on with that one.
The evolution of the xenomorph through these movies is, like, really confusing because, like, there are multiple versions of facehuggers. There are, like, multiple versions of things that, like, inject people with the xenomorph in the first place. And then, like, you've got the almost xenomorph-looking xenomorph that the engineer spits out. But then you've got, like, the weird skin-tone xenomorph in Covenant. And then you've got, like, the more traditional-looking xenomorph also in Covenant. And it's very confusing. I don't understand this evolutionary line at all. It looks like David's just kind of messing with DNA at this point.
Yeah.
Well, he might be. I don't know. It's very confusing.
Yeah. I like that David's fingerprint have the Weyland-Yutani logo on him. That was a nice detail.
Oh, that's funny.
You didn't notice that?
I did not notice that. That's funny.
When he's, like, looking at the goop, the black goo under the microscope before he spikes old dude's drink, he's got, like, a drop of it on his finger, and you see, like, his fingerprint up close, and you actually see the Weyland-Yutani logo on it. They fucking branded that dude like Batman brands his bat-shaped cookies that he gives to Ace. But yeah, that was pretty much. I think that covers all my thoughts. More things need to brand people's fingerprints. I think that's a safe takeaway from this film.
Not science fiction dystopian at all.
Nope.
Not even a little bit.
Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with this?
I guess the last, like, little thing I'll say is I do sort of think by the end of it, Prometheus and Covenant are kind of a two-parter. You almost have to watch both together.
I'm glad you picked both then, Steve.
Yeah, I know, no kidding. I didn't want to pick both, but so in Covenant, David meets his not replacement, but like another unit that is like a synthetic human, and this one's name is Walter. So Walter and David are hanging out in Covenant after David has killed all the remaining engineers and is creating xenomorphs in his giant cave and is now growing out his hair and looks a little bit like a hippie. But in that movie, he recites the poem Ozymandias, and he mistakenly attributes it to Byron. And Walter hears that, and he's like, that's sketch. I wonder what's going on. And then later he realizes that David's clearly lost his mind a little bit. And that's why he said Byron instead of Shelley, because at this point he's not like really thinking. He's just going with the flow. But at the same time, he quotes the Ozymandias poem as he is literally ruining an empire with all of his baby xenomorphs that have now murdered this and desecrated this entire planet. And it sort of starts to feel like at that point he's almost seen the irony of this whole thing, where he decides that he's going to rebel against what the engineers and what humanity want, which is to constantly be in this cycle of their own destruction by killing the engineers and stopping the cycle. But instead, all he's done is created another generation. Because in Prometheus, you kind of close the loop. You've got the engineers who create humanity and the xenomorphs, and then you have humanity who creates David. And then David goes back and takes the xenomorph and the engineer and creates something between the two, which is that thing that gets born out of the Prometheus, out of the engineer's body at the end in Prometheus. And so like it sort of creates this circle that gets closed off. But by the time you get to Alien Covenant, you realize David's kind of abandoned that. And instead, he's really just doing exactly what the engineers and what humanity did. He's making his own children, and they're all going to go out into the world and wreck shit. And he's become their god. And he thinks he's not the vengeful kind of god, that he's not going to judge them based on whether or not they should live or die. He's going to let them be. And the xenomorphs in that movie have to learn to trust him, which is not a thing that like humanity or the engineers either presume of each other. And so that dynamic becomes really, really interesting. And seeing that David kind of starts more cynically in this movie, but almost seems to change his mind by the time he gets to Covenant is really cool. I like the way that goes in a different direction, but then it also sort of creates that same problem Prometheus has, which is by the time you get to the end of that movie, it's even less clear how they end up at the first Alien movie. Like, if you think Prometheus leaves too many questions about how you get from here to Alien, Covenant just creates even more, and it's kind of hilarious how he's able to top himself.
I'll have to check it out, because I remember Rasco really liked Covenant. He was the big Alien guy. But I remember you said you hated it, and so I was like, I don't know. I trust Steve's opinion on this more. So it's funny to see that you've come around on it a little bit. Not quite as much. You still think it's the weaker film, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alien, Covenant, and Prometheus are the Alien movies.
Really? You don't?
But Covenant is
Aliens
definitely the weakest. I like Aliens. I just like it. So my thing is just, I like the Alien movies where is basically just trying to do a deep dive into the soul of humanity. So like Alien is that, Prometheus is that, Covenant is that, so like that just jives with me more. Aliens is arguably a better movie than Covenant, at the very least. But I get a lot more joy watching Covenant than I do watching Alien.
See, I don't know. I think Aliens... I think you might be giving some discredit to Aliens. I think Aliens has some, like, deeper stuff going on with it that's just, like, maybe lost a little bit in just the epicness that is James Cameron films.
No, it totally does. It's one of those things where it's an action movie that is way smarter than it seems at first because there's just so much action happening. But, like, there's a lot in that movie that's really interesting and really well made. But like the fundamental questions that movie is asking, I find less interesting than the ones Covenant and Prometheus are asking.
Okay, fair enough. You're wrong, but fair. Alrighty. Well, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about with this. And think you're pretty good. You checked off your boxes. Steve's takeaway is don't believe the hype train. Just agree with your own damned self. Don't just take your opinions from others. Especially Joss Whedon.
He is always about Alien 4. So I imagine he just took that out.
Alrighty. Steve, what would you rate Prometheus?
I would give Prometheus 4 out of 5 weirdly satanic androids.
Okay. I'm gonna give it 3 out of 5 goopy snake things. Hey buddy, it's okay buddy.
When that thing snaps his arm, like I visibly, that's rough.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Like it's great physical horror. It's just the trope of idiots around terrifying situation just never works for me. I don't like that one.
Who are allegedly scientists that behave like hillbillies. It's very strange.
I swear to fucking God, man. Like, if it had been the security crew or something, maybe. But, yeah, just swear to fucking God. Alright. Yeah. I guess it's my turn. I did a discussion topic last time, so I want to do a review of something, but I don't know what. I have a bad tendency of just, like, picking children's entertainment because it's what I've been seeing a lot of lately, but then, like, we just run out of stuff to talk about after 20 minutes, so I don't want to do that again.
Do you want like a day to consider?
No. This is everybody's favorite part of Geeky Gentlemen, when clearly someone has not thought through something at all and then just sits there and dwells on it for a few minutes before finally picking something.
Well, you're always saying how the only way I can get you to like read or watch something is by picking it for a review. So, like, what's on your that, like, you need an excuse to pick?
Hold on a sec. I got a giant stack of comics that I bought that I've not read. Give me one sec.
Okay. All right, there we go. Go there. He's not gonna edit any of this out. I just want you to know.
This might be random as fuck, but I've got 2 volumes of it, so it's what I'm gonna pick because I've got 2 volumes of it. It's by someone that I like, so I've never read it yet, so we're gonna go for it. Well, we're gonna review the first 2 volumes of Animosity.
What is that?
It's a comic by Margaret Bennett, who did Bombshells, and Rafael de la Torre for the art, I believe. So that should be good time. Or maybe they're the co-writers.
Okay, so you said the first 2 volumes?
Yeah, so it's Animosity, The Wake, and The Dragon.
The Wake and the Dragon.
By Aftershock. Cool. And I've got physical copies of these books, so I don't have to deal with fucking read comics online bullshit.
Hey, there you go.
Alrighty. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am not a xenomorph yet.
But, I did get, like, face hugged the other day, and now I'm really hungry. That's something I'm disappointed got removed from the later films of that gestation period where they just needed to eat like a pregnant woman. That was a good detail. That's
always really funny in the first movie because like he gets up, he's feeling fine. He has like a bite to eat and immediately starts vomiting. Mm-hmm. It's pretty great.
Yeah. All right, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher. I did this part already.
And I am the Disappointment.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.